So, Rosa, Shibley got at something that I wanted to pose to you. Um, U.S. policy towards Israel has been pretty stable within certain parameters, Democrat to Republican. Um, but it does seem to me to be generational, and it does seem to me to be changing. And you know, the most Jewish place in the United States, New York City, is now massively opposed to what's going on in Israel and supporting a mayoral candidate who's openly opposed to it. Um, they're also opposed to the policies that the Biden administration had with regard to Gaza. Trump was a rubber stamp, yes, 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 for Israel, and yet yesterday he did sit down and say, "I will oppose annexation." I don't know if he actually will, and I don't, I mean, he'll say anything to any crowd. Um, but I think there is a sense that you can't deny that this is a genocide anymore. You can't deny that Israel is a bad actor, that Netanyahu is a bad actor. And all the traditional grounds for support seem to be um, evaporating. Is the old U.S. Israel relationship dead?
The old US everybody relationship is dead. The old US is dead. So I think the answer to that is yes, but it's a subset of, a broader and seismic shift in how the world perceives the US, whether as an ally or as an adversary, that the age of Donald Trump has kind of exploded everybody's assumptions about the United States as an actor that will have either a predictable or a coherent and consistent role interacting with others. And I think Trump's speech and Sibley's Sibley, your characterization of it is disastrous is, if anything, probably understates it slightly, right? But it's an example. He just says whatever he feels like saying, and he contradicts himself right in the same speech a dozen times. So I think though, I mean, a couple of things that sort of jump out at me from listening to Rula and Shibley. One is Shibley, you put your figure on a perennial problem, which is the disconnect within the US, certainly between what the public seems to want and either how that does or does not translate into their voting behavior, but also how that does or doesn't translate into policy decisions made by the executive branch. And here again, Israel and Palestine is a subset of a much larger problem and puzzle, which is that issue by issue for decades, the American public has been somewhat to the left, issue by issue, policy by policy, than either Democratic or Republican administrations. That if you poll people on, well, would you like universal health care? Oh, yes, we absolutely want that. That the American public issue by issue is pretty reasonable, pretty compassionate, and substantially to the left of the executive branch quite consistently, no matter which party controls the White House. That remains true. I think the problem is both that doesn't reliably translate into voting behavior for all kinds of reasons that people don't quite grasp the connection between their policy preferences and what a candidate is saying, or they're going for whoever's most charismatic, or they're just going for they're voting on the pocketbook issues as they understand them, and their instincts about things that happen far away just don't matter to them that much when they vote. But then also, that there's even more so, and partly for that reason, the fact that Americans say this or that in polls really doesn't necessarily move the needle. I mean, and we saw that, going back many, many years. I'm thinking about, for instance, at the height of the Iraq War, when very large majorities of the American public were saying, this is terrible. Why are we doing this? Stop. But it took years for that to actually unwind as a matter of U.S. policy. I'm not feeling like, oh, well, this is going to lead to a sea change in US policy, even though I think you're absolutely right that there has been a sea change and it's generational, and I don't think we're going to see it going back for at least a generation in terms of how Americans feel about Israel. That I think at this point it is very widely viewed, with the exception of a sort of shrinking conservative group, as an irresponsible actor, as an actor that is committing atrocities at this point, and not an entity that the U.S. should be blindly supporting, and perhaps not even supporting at all. That sea change is real, but I don't know that it's going to make a difference in terms of policy. That being said, and here's the only bright side I'll pull out, and Shibley, this is something that you hinted at the very end of the foreign affairs piece that David just mentioned. Um, Trump's very inconsistency, incoherency, will be polite and say it, mercurial qualities, may be the one hope that we have, right? That Trump, for better or for worse, really doesn't care about being consistent. It really pisses him off when he thinks that somebody is playing with him. He Any other president would hesitate to do a complete about face on any issue. And yet, as we've just seen on Trump's pronouncements about Ukraine, for instance, and Russia, oh, anything goes, right? We're total 360s, 180s, whatever. We spin around. We're all over the place. And I don't think it's completely impossible that Netanyahu could just piss him off enough that, despite his dreams of a Riviera-style resort development in Gaza, etc., that he could suddenly decide, no, I'm just done being messed with by Netanyahu, and I'm going to punish you. Would that last? I don't know, but in a funny way, I actually think that there is less of there's been a bipartisan lock on U.S. aid for Israel for decades. Trump, not for any good reasons, but for bad reasons, might be the one guy who'd be willing to say, oh yeah, well, I don't care, we're done.